The podcasting world is constantly evolving. And in 2025, we're going to see a lot of changes that I cannot wait to share with you today. As someone who lives and breathes podcasting and does this for a living, I have a few clues and a few insights along with my team member, Emily. We're going to share with you today what you can expect in podcasting in 2025. Be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, and follow along for more so you don't miss anything that can help you with your podcasting game in 2025. Let's get into it. Emily, welcome back to As It Relates to Podcasting. Thanks for joining me for our roundtable today.
Of course, Simona. Happy to be here.
I'm so excited. We're going to talk about 2025 trends and predictions for the year ahead in the world of podcasting. And I feel like we need to start out with one of the most obvious ones, which is going to be, in my opinion, I don't know what you think, video first podcasting. What are your thoughts? Just by what we've seen with like trends as well with clients in the last 6 months or so.
Yeah, I definitely think like it's a huge trend that's moving that way. We're having more platforms adding a video component, like I think Spotify, things like that. Like we're having more and more people who are adding that video component, which I think can be really helpful to certain people, especially if they can be closed captioned and things like that. Like it opens up your audience, it adds an accessibility factor, that kind of thing. I know for me, I still listen to just traditional old audio podcasts mostly, but I do watch other YouTube videos from some of my podcasters that they do on different things on. So I think it's a good way to like integrate and that kind of thing. So I think that's definitely like a huge trend that people are going to start doing more of.
I think so too. And then in addition to that, I also think that there was a stat that came out. I can't remember who published the research. And I believe the stat was like 61% of audio first listeners discover their new podcast through YouTube. And they don't consume the podcast on YouTube, but they discover them on YouTube because YouTube is a search engine, right? It's the same, same type of, it's a search engine just like Google is. And now you have Spotify for creators that's also kind of coming into that space and trying to dominate in video as well. And so people are going to these different platforms and searching for content that relates to what they want to learn more about. And then they'll take that show name and they'll go into their podcast platforms, podcast apps, and they'll find those shows, subscribe, and download from there. So I think that even if you're not like a video first podcaster right now, even just taking your content and putting it on YouTube, even if it has just a regular cover art on it and not an actual video, I think will be an important trend to kind of get in the places that you want to be without having to do a whole lot of extra work to be there.
Yeah, I mean, it just adds another way of being able to be searched for. So it's kind of like what you were saying, like even if you could just put an image over it, like why not? To me, I think it's one of those things that most people also when they're recording, I will say that like I feel like most of our clients record with video anyways.
Exactly.
And so it's kind of like you already
Exactly.
have it, even if you're like, oh, I really don't want to use this because I wasn't feeling my best that day or whatever, or you show up, in sweatshirts and whatever. I think that still having that as a backup, because then you can also use that for your reels and stuff like that. Even if you don't have the full video on your YouTube,
Mhm.
you still have that video aspect that you can use for other things. But I think that it
I
makes
love
sense
that.
to put yourself in as many search engines as possible.
I agree with you. And that's actually the second trend that we're going to talk about is creating that micro content from your bigger content. And now I don't think that this is a new concept inherently, but what I do think is people are going to be prioritizing different ways to take the content that they have and that's already existent and repurpose that into that shorter bite-sized content and also thinking outside of the box in different ways to promote their content and their show.
I will say Facebook Reels, I get so many podcasts, like shorts in there and that kind of thing, like just like little snippets of them. I haven't even necessarily watched the whole podcast, but even those clips, like I talk about them to other people. I share them with other people. And so
Exactly.
I'm kind of curious. I kind of want to go back to some of them and be like, have you actually listened to that podcast? Like I haven't listened to it, but I've shared about 20 of their reels with you.
Well, this
So
is a
just
really
curious.
interesting thing though, because I've heard this so much though, and this is something that I see like in all the time. People are not going to come from your reel necessarily to go directly to your podcast. They're going
Mhm.
to watch it, they're going to consume it. There's a lot of like creators on TikTok, even for example, that I'll watch their podcast content on their TikTok, but I've never actually gone and listened to the podcast on audio or video or anything like that. It's a really interesting like thing because you can have your podcast, create short clips out of your podcast, right? And then you take that content and you can put that content on social media and it's just helping you reinforce and create your brand on social media. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
not like yeah, you're like, you're still being present, you're still being there, and you can be creating out your accounts in a big significant way with the intention of hoping that they'll come back to your show and listen, but you're also creating brand awareness. Like, having your shorter clips creates a brand for you. It
Yeah.
creates brand recognition for you.
And it also is one of those things where, like, I know, like, I don't know as much about this because I'm not a social media guru person who knows all the ins and outs. I mean, I have a hard time posting even to my personal social media, let's be real.
Same.
But I know that, there are more ways to monetize social media, real views and stuff like that. And so, even if you have people who aren't listening to your whole podcast, you're still technically growing your audience and you're still technically like expanding that audience because they may
Mhm.
just interact with you in a different way. And a different way
1,000%.
isn't necessarily a bad way, you know?
Well, yeah, because you can also have things like more speaking gigs if that's what you wanna do. So, like, one of the ways that I look at this from is in the speaking world, for example, if you submit yourself to speak at different events, the event planners will go and they will look and see, like, does this person talk about this topic? Do they have any type of social media following? We do it the same for podcast guests when we're securing guests. Are you also a subject matter online about what you're talking about? Do the messages match? Like, what you're pitching and what you do to impact on an online level, they matter, right? And I think that having your podcast, creating that content, also, I feel like we're going to see a huge shift towards more solo episodes versus just guest interviews. Like, that's been a huge trend that I've seen within just our clients within the agency. Is people want to be seen. People want to share their message. You know what I mean? They want to use their podcast as lead gen tools, bring clients on, create brand partnerships, and solidify themselves as the go-to person in that space. Well, how do you do that? Is by making sure that you're the person who's sharing the message in a more powerful way.
Yeah, anyone can say that. Like, I could sit there and email people and tell them I know everything about social media, but
And then they'd be like, "Oh, okay."
yeah, and if you just took me at my word and brought me on a show, let me tell you, that show would not perform well. It would not do well in that certain topic. But, it's one of these things
Although
where,
I
like,
have
if you
seen
took
some of the social media content that you've created, and it's actually been really good.
mostly
So,
my dogs or my crafts. But, it's one of those things where it's like, you do need to do that little bit of due diligence if you're looking for speakers, that kind of thing. And on the
mhm.
other end of that, if you are looking for those gigs, if you're wanting to expand that audience in that way and you want to be on more stages, you also need to do the due diligence of making sure that people know what you are talking about. So yeah, I think that micro content is going to be super important for people because I feel like also even with your community group, so many people want to become speakers on different stages. Like that was a huge goal for a lot of
Mhm.
people. Well, you got
Mhm.
to make sure that people want you on that stage because you are an expert or you are the go-to person.
Exactly, exactly, and I think that just aligns a lot to, like, branded podcasts, corporate podcasts, small business podcasts, entrepreneur podcasts, like, business podcasts that align to your actual business versus just creating, like, an entertainment podcast for fun, because, it's fun to, like, want to do a podcast and have a podcast and all of that, but it also is a lot of time, it's a lot of energy, and it can be a lot of money if you're outsourcing it, and so you wanna make it grow, right? You want it to go somewhere, and when things get more seen online, if you will, it's because it's sharing a message that people resonate with, right? So you're solving problems for people, challenges that people have, answering questions that people have without even really realizing that that's what you're doing. You know what I mean? Especially an
Yeah.
entertainment podcast, but even an entertainment podcast, like even a murder podcast or, what do they call? Oh God, what do they call?
Like, all right, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Murder?
Yeah.
There's lots of different genres within true crime. There's lots of different. It's
Yeah.
not just murder, but yes.
But even those true crime podcasts, like, they are answering a question at the end of the day. People are curious. People wanna know the answer to what happened. People
Yeah.
wanna hear someone pull together all the information, right? So whatever niche market you're in, you have a huge opportunity. But then there's also the fact of authenticity in podcasting, authenticity over perfection. I've never been someone who has been, like, perfection to a T, because I think that it takes away from the humanness to what you're doing. I get it, like, you need to have a quality and a standard,
Yeah.
but too much perfection can actually hinder you and block you.
And I think we've even, like, touched on this in a past like roundtable where I've said like I have literally stopped listening to podcasts that I feel like are maybe too overproduced. It's one thing if I'm listening to a podcast that is like a fictional storytelling kind of thing and they set the scene with like background noises and stuff like that. Like that's one thing. I'm expecting that level of production for those,
But it's
you
also
know?
but it's an experience though. You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
it's an experience. It's an audio
Exactly.
experience. Yeah.
Exactly, and it's that expectation of that's what I'm like, I need that stuff to set that stage, right?
Mhm.
Versus 2 people talking or something like that, or like a true crime podcast that adds all this extra background noise and stuff. I'm like, "I don't need to be there." Like, I don't need to, like, hear this, like, background noise of people on a subway when you talk about them being on a like, I don't need that, you know? I just wanna, like if I just wanna listen to some kind of like like not fiction, but like kind of storytelling, fact finding thing. I don't need to hear all that extra. Like I'm just listening for you putting it together in a cohesive way.
The next thing, in addition to all of this, that I think is going to be really interesting, obviously, AI is going nowhere. Obviously, you have editing softwares like Descript, for example, text based editing, hosting platforms like Captivate FM, Buzzsprout that are trying to make the production process a lot easier. I believe that AI will continue to make a huge impact, but my thought is that it's actually going to also require more of a human element than it's ever had in the past. So I think that we'll continue to see people using AI, but I think that now we're going to see a lot more people adding in their own human touch first. And I'll give you an example. There's a clip selector. It's called Opus Clips. Well, there's a couple of them, but I've used Opus Clips in the past. And you put your episode in and you upload it, and it chops it up into like 20 different clips. Well, it's great because it's helpful, but in those 20 different clips, probably like more than half of them start in the middle of a sentence with no context around the thought. So I think that having a human touch and like a human element to it is still going to be something that's really important, because otherwise your message doesn't land. If it's confusing, it doesn't land.
So like if you're looking for interesting clips for that micro content, having AI, like I think it probably looks for certain words and that kind of thing. That's probably like a trigger. But the problem is that interesting to AI may not be interesting to an actual person. So I think that is really important. Like when you were listening to it, if you were doing the editing, what piqued your interest? Like what did you say? Oh, that's a really good point. Like, oh, I forgot we talked about that. And then use those versus relying on a computer to pick what's important. And I think I was just going to say the more AI continues, I think we also are learning about the impact of AI more too. And so I will be curious to see how many people still want to use it to a certain extent and how much they use it. So
Mhm.
I think it's going to be this really interesting balance of like how often you use it and stuff like that.
I love that. And I also think, as a last kind of closing thought, I think that we're going to see more focus on monetization. I think we're going to see a focus on brand partnerships, brand sponsorships, and also leveraging our own businesses to sponsor episodes, to lead people back into the business, to purchase digital products, affiliate sales, and all kinds of stuff. I think in the past, people have been wanting to do that, and I'm seeing just from our podcast successful membership community and also one-on-one clients that we work with, this is a huge, huge, huge focus. And there are so many brands that are out there that are ready to sponsor podcasts and create partnerships. So I think this is going to be a massive focus for 2025.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think exactly what you're saying, like even a move away from just those ad sales kind of things,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, like you start tuning them out because everybody is advertising Quince, everybody's
Mhm.
advertising, Squarespace, whatever it is, and
Book. Yeah.
you've already used that promo code once, so can't use it anymore, that kind of thing. But having your own products and stuff like that where people might be coming back, you might be offering more things. And also,
Mhm.
like, even outside of like, I don't want people to think that it's exclusively for people who are coaching or who are
Mm.
even doing that kind of business. Because I listen to some podcasts that are a knitting podcast. Like, they talk about fiber arts, and so I've bought yarn from them, and so, like, I'm a repeat customer because I've heard about them. Now, do they always have a promo going on? No, but it's also the people who are running the podcast, it's their yarn dyeing business. So, it's still going back to them, and then they've also used that opportunity to highlight other people that they really like or brands that they really like or, where they get certain things. They'll highlight those, so I might go check those out. So
Mhm.
again, that's not one that is a direct like coaching business. Oh, I have a free download or something like that. But they get people interested because they're also talking about the
Exactly.
things that they're making with their own stuff. So you're like, oh, I'm gonna go see what that looks like. You go see what it looks like, and then you're like, oh my God, look at all these really pretty yarn colors. I must buy
Mhm.
some. Or
I
maybe that's just
must
me.
buy. I would buy all the shades of pink. But also, I think that it creates a humanness behind the brand, a humanness behind the show. It leads back to this idea of authenticity. It leads back to the AI side and bringing more humanity into the AI content that is created and that is produced. It also allows you to repurpose your content, taking those longer episodes and making them into that micro content that is continuing to fuel and feed your brand that you're creating. And all of that begins with video first.
Yeah.
So these are all of my thoughts in terms of 2025. And I'm sure halfway through the year, we'll have way more. Is there anything else that you wanted to add in before we wrap up our conversation today?
I think the other trend that we're gonna see for 2025, just one last one, is hopefully the people who have been sitting on their podcast idea, they're actually gonna take action and make it start. I think that we have some people who are even in the membership who are like, "This is the year I'm making a plan. I'm going to write down when my first episode comes out and when I need to record my things by." And that's really exciting. I love that idea that there's gonna be more voices out there and more topics for people to explore.
I love that. I love that so much. I couldn't agree with you more. And on that note, if you are interested in having some more support in a more meaningful and tangible way that'll actually take you from idea to the airwaves and also taking the content that you already have and amplifying it even more, check out our podcast Success Vault. It is our membership. We meet on a weekly basis. It's kind of like a mini mastermind, and it's $27 a month. So I'll leave the link for that in the episode notes below. Thank you, Emily, for joining me to talk about 2025 trends. I'm really grateful for you. Thank you.